Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This is Basketball History 101 with Rick Loayza.
Welcome back to Award-winning Basketball History 101, part of the Sports History Network. I am your host, Rick Loayza, and this is the podcast we bring to life some of the forgotten stories from basketball history. We are bringing old school basketball to a new school audience, and today we bring you the story of Bobby Plump. He was the real Jimmy Chitwood, and in case you do not remember, Jimmy Chitwood was the fictitious star basketball player for Hickory High School in the 1986 film Hoosiers. In my opinion, Hoosiers is one of the best basketball movies ever made. In short, the movie is about tiny Hickory High School in rural Indiana. The team had never seen any real success in their history, but when a new coach comes to town, he turns the team into a powerhouse unit. And here comes a spoiler alert. The team goes on to win the 1952 Indiana State Basketball Championship. Now, the movie is 38 years old, so I do not mind giving away the ending. However, if you get a chance to see the movie, go for it. It really is a well-made underdog story. Now, I used to coach my own kids in youth basketball, and between my 3 kids, I coached for about 11 years at the youth levels, and I would watch Hoosiers every year before the season started to get myself focused on what I was going to try to do as a coach. Anyway, the star player of the team was again Jimmy Chitwood, who was called on in the clutch to make the game-winning shot against South Bend High School in the championship game. Now, that movie is loosely based on a real team, the 1954 Indiana State champion Milan High School, and the star of the real Milan team was Bobby Plump. He is the real-life player that the character of Jimmy Chitwood is based on. In 1954, Bobby Plump made the game-winning shot to defeat Muncie Central High School 32-30. Now, I did an entire episode on the Milan story way back in episode 45. However, for today, I just want to focus on Bobby Plump and his story beyond the improbable victory in 1954. Plump was the star who secured the victory and created what is now known as the Milan Miracle. However, Plump was not from the town of Milan. He came from one town over called Pierceville. He grew up as the youngest of 6 siblings, and his mother died when he was young and was raised by a widowed father. Now, they had electricity in the house, but no indoor plumbing and no telephone. If he needed to make a call, he had to go to the neighbor's house and ask to use their phone. As for a toilet, well, they had an outhouse in the back behind the house. His older sister Dorothy, or Dot for short, was quite a bit older and helped raise Bobby since she had not yet married and was still living at home. Now, the town of Pierceville was so small that it did not have its own high school. The kids of Pierceville were assigned to attend Milan High School. Now, Bobby used to say that going to Milan on the weekends was like going to the big city. If anyone in Pierceville needed to do some shopping or wanted to eat at a restaurant, then they had to go to Milan to do that. Now, Bobby always showed incredible athleticism and skill in both basketball and baseball. And when Bobby was young, the Pierceville youth baseball team used to defeat the Milan team regularly, and they did the same in basketball as well. The basketball coach at Milan High School was excited since he knew that these talented Pierceville boys would be funneled to his school, and he knew that he would have something special when they all got together. That coach of Milan High School was a guy named Snort Grinstead. He was 52 years old and had been the coach there for years, and he was very well respected and ran his basketball team like a military unit. And when Bobby arrived, he played little on the varsity since he was still only 14 years old and had not grown into his full height. But everyone could tell that the kid from Pierceville was going to be a really good player. In his second year on the team, Milan went all the way to the regionals before getting knocked out of the playoffs, and for a small school like Milan, that was considered a great success. All of the small schools typically were eliminated from the playoffs in the early rounds. The later rounds were the territory of the big schools, like the ones from Indianapolis or Lafayette, Gary, Muncie, Columbus, or Fort Wayne. These schools might have as many as 1,000 boys from which to select a basketball team. Now, Milan High School only had 73 boys in the entire school from which to select players for a basketball team. It was simply a case of David versus Goliath, and back then in the state of Indiana, every school participated in the playoffs regardless of their record. The Indiana of the 1950s had nearly 800 high schools that had to play in a massive single elimination tournament that took 4 weekends to complete. It would typically take 9 or 10 rounds of playoffs to determine a state champion. But if you were a small school, you might get away with defeating the other small schools in the first few rounds, but eventually the playoffs becomes a gauntlet of some of the largest schools in the entire state. Well, in that second year, Bobby got a lot more playing time and led the team in scoring, but the team was still developing, which is why they got eliminated in the regionals. Now again, that was a huge success for a school as small as Milan. Now, even though that season, the 1952 season, was successful, it turned out to be the last game for their head coach. Coach Grinstead had decided to order some new uniforms for the team. However, he did so without permission, and he sent the bill to the school board. In a political power play on the part of the school board, Coach Grinstead was fired from his position, and the town was angry about the coach's dismissal. I mean, what were they going to do now? The team had a bunch of young, talented players, and they were only getting better, especially that Bobby Plump. He had reached his full height of 6'1" or 185 centimeters, and he was not the tallest player in Indiana, but he could shoot and was always running. Now, before the school year was over, the superintendent that fired the coach was fired himself. That is how much the community loved the coach. But the old coach was not coming back. He had already found another job in a larger city. So the school board had to find a new coach, and they had to find him quickly. Now, this is a good place to take a break, and I'll be right back with the new coach of Milan High School.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
At the Sports History Network, we're all about sports yesteryear, and so we're so pleased to introduce you to Row 1, an online memorabilia gallery and shop that brings your sports history to life anywhere. The Row 1 gallery includes over 5,200 gorgeously reproduced prints of team posters, game program covers, game tickets, advertisements, and more in baseball, pro and college football, pro and college basketball, and more. And any gallery item may be printed in a variety of sizes on wood, metal, canvas, acrylic, or poster paper. And in Row 1 shop, check out the thousands more of unique items with the retro and historical designs dating back to 1876, including t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, phone cases, mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com, ROW1, for access to the full Row 1 catalog and for gallery prints and gift items, plus get a 15% discount off all prints on the Row 1 Pictorium Gallery with coupon code SHN15. Follow the link on the show notes.
Hello, sports history fans. I'm Ross from the podcast Pigskin Tales. You're about to jump into another thrilling sports history moment, but first, let's dive into today's sponsor, just in time for the holiday season. Introducing Art of Words, the brainchild of word artist Dan Duffy from Philadelphia. Dan meticulously crafts stunning images by handwriting relevant words from some of the greatest sports moments in time. These unique, budget-friendly illustrations are the perfect gift, sparking cherished memories and capturing hearts. Choose from city skylines, sports, history, and musicians to find a piece for everyone. And here's the exciting part. For that sports fanatic in your life, gift them a piece of their favorite team or player's history. Art of Words tells a compelling story. Explore collegiate stadiums, each meticulously crafted with every football victory etched into words. Or venture into baseball stadiums, handwritten with every player from the team's illustrious history. My favorite on the site is Bryce Harper 2021 MVP year. Because I'm a big stats guy, I think that's one of the coolest things ever. Check it out. Don't wait. Order a print today for yourself and your loved one this holiday season. Transform your wall into a gallery of captivating art and surprise your family and friends with a print of their own. Use code SHN15 at artofwords.com for a 15% discount on your order in November and December. Visit Art of Words, where words magically transform into stunning art, evoking cherished memories and touching the hearts of those who you care about. Again, use the code SHN15 for 15% off at artofwords.com.
Welcome back to the show, and let us continue with the story of Bobby Plump and the Milan Miracle. Now, the school board found a new coach for the team. He was a 24-year-old coach by the name of Marvin Wood, and he had played at Butler University for legendary coach Tony Hinkle. He was married with 2 young kids, and the school board hired him away from French Lick High School in the western Indiana. French Lick High School might sound familiar because in the 1970s, they had a player by the name of Larry Bird. But this was still 1952, and Larry Bird had not even been born yet. So young Coach Wood comes over to Milan to take over the basketball team. With a new coach coming in, most of the boys at Milan thought that this might be their chance to make the team, since the new coach was coming in with a blank slate and no preconceptions about anyone's ability. So 58 of the 73 boys in the school tried out for the basketball team. However, the team primarily consisted of the returning players from the year before, with a couple of new additions to replace the seniors that had gone away after graduation. Now, Bobby was to be a starter just like the year before. He was clearly the best player on the team and would continue to develop into even better player. However, his season nearly ended before it even got started. He was driving along one of the many rural roads in that area and was in a terrible car accident. The car flipped over, but thankfully Bobby walked away with just a scratch. The car was totaled, but Bobby was fine. And this was huge news for the towns of Pierceville and Milan. You see, in Indiana, if you are the star of the local basketball team, you are practically treated like a celebrity. The star player is practically the king of the town. That is still true today in Indiana, especially rural Indiana. The towns of Pierceville and Milan breathed a collective sigh of relief when they found out that Bobby was okay and he would be able to play basketball. So the season got started with great success. Coach Wood brought in the offensive system that he learned playing at Butler. As for the defense, he turned that over to assistant coach Mark Combs, who was the coach of the Pierceville youth basketball team. And he wanted to install a zone trap scheme on defense. Now, Wood was skeptical at first since he had never played a zone trap defense before, but the boys learned it quickly and they used it to great effectiveness. Coach Wood quickly came around and loved the new defense. Now, Bobby continued to develop and was the scoring leader of the team, and was considered the best player, not just at Milan, but possibly the best player in the entire county. In the spring of 1953, it was time for the playoffs to start, and Bobby's girlfriend had broken up with him. Now, to say that he was distraught would be to underplay the situation. He was 16 years old, and his first love had just kicked him to the curb. Coach Wood was genuinely concerned for Bobby's state of mind, but Bobby was able to compartmentalize, and when it came to basketball, he was able to put his personal life aside and play like his normal self. Now, the Milan team made it through round after round, and they made it all the way to the state semifinals. In other words, they made it to the final weekend to play in Indiana's version of the Final Four. Now, back then, the semifinals and finals were played at Butler University in Indianapolis because it was the largest gym in the entire state. It sat around 15,000 people. Now, if you have seen the movie Hoosiers, they filmed the last 2 games in the real Butler Fieldhouse because they wanted that huge facility for the film, and because the arena still looks the same way as it did in the 1950s. However, in 1953, Little Milan High School lost in the semifinals to South Bend Central High School by a score of 56-37. It was a beatdown. Now, at this point, Bobby was on the radar of all the big universities in Indiana. He was getting recruited by Indiana University, Purdue University, Butler University, just about everybody. And he was clearly a great shooter and an unselfish player. Now, there are 2 ways to look at this game. You can look at it positively because Milan had never made it that far in the playoffs before. To make it to the Final Four teams out of nearly 800 schools in Indiana is an incredible accomplishment. At the same time, to be that close to the championship and not get it is still quite disappointing. But all of the starters were coming back the following school year. The Milan team was fully expecting to go all the way. Now, the following year would be Bobby's final chance at a state championship. They started the season hot and were winning game after game. And then it came to the spring of 1954 and the playoffs. That year, 753 high schools participated in the playoffs. In the state quarterfinals, their opponent was Crispus Attucks High School from Indianapolis. Now, Attucks was an all-black high school that featured a 15-year-old Oscar Robertson. But it was not Oscar's time yet. He would lead his team to back-to-back state titles in 1955 and 1956. But this was still 1954, and he was still a sophomore and was still developing. Now, Milan won that game 65-52 to clinch their spot in the state semifinals. Bobby had been the clear star of the team and was proving himself as one of the best players in the entire state of Indiana. In the semifinals, they defeated Gerstmeyer 60-48 and were now in the last game for the state championship. Now, this was only 1954, but the championship game was televised throughout the entire state. It seems that everyone in Indiana was either at the game, watching it on TV, or listening to it on the radio. The state basketball championship was as big of a sporting event in Indiana as the Indianapolis 500. It was really a massive, massive event. But Milan had some bad news going into the championship game the same day as their semifinal game. Bobby had injured his ankle in the morning game, but it was not too serious, but it was still quite painful. And it did affect Bobby. His shooting was off since he could not get the same lift as he used to on his jump shot. He shot only 3 for 11 in the championship game, and that is a very un-Bobby performance. Coach Wood decided to play a slow game for Bobby's sake. They held the ball for minutes to reduce the amount of running Bobby would have to do on a hurting ankle. Now, as the game against Muncie Central High School approached its final minute, the game was tied at 30 points apiece. With 48 seconds left, the Muncie Central High School had the ball and missed a wide open layup. Milan grabbed the rebound, held the ball for 30 seconds, and then called a timeout to draw up a final play. And just like in the movie Hoosiers, they ran the picket fence to give Bobby Plump the game-winning shot. The filmmakers decided to use the exact same play that the real Milan High School used. They even had the character of Jimmy Chitwood make the same move that Bobby Plump had made in real life. He dribbled the ball near the top of the key and then fakes left and goes right. He stops and pops for a 14-foot jump shot and nails it. Milan won the 1954 Indiana State Championship, and Bobby Plump became an overnight celebrity. The entire state of Indiana knew who he was, and after the game, it seemed that he was autographing everybody's game program. At least on that day, he was the most famous person in Indiana, and it was an incredible night for the entire Milan community. They were at the top of high school basketball in Indiana, and that meant everything. But there is more to the Bobby Plump story than hitting a game-winning shot when he was 17 years old. He went on to play in college, became an insurance salesman, and went into politics. So this will conclude part 1 of our story on Bobby Plump. Come back next week when we conclude our story in part 2. That's next time on Basketball History 101, part of the Sports History Network, the headquarters of Sports Yesteryear. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com to find out more about this and other sports history podcasts. If you like what you hear, please hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcast. And check out our page on Facebook. It's called Basketball History 101 Podcast. There you will find shorter historical posts as well as comments and discussion starters on today's game. I'll also announce there when new episodes come out. I want to thank my producer and editor, Jacob Loayza. Join us each week as we continue to mine the history of basketball for more great stories from the past. Take care and see you soon.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear. starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.